Next is our discussion of the choose function. Now, what the choose function does is that it allows the user to return a value from a data range based on where that data is positioned in the data set. And this is specifically useful in financial modeling because in modeling you will often have forecasts, or models are effectively based on forecasts of the future. And in any acquisition, you'll have multiple parties in the transaction providing their own forecasts based on their own assumptions about how the company is going to perform in the future. So you can have a management forecast, which is the company's management's view of how the company is going to perform. You can have the investment banks or the brokers forecast, who are basically the party facilitating the deal. And they can kind of have their own assumptions about how the company is going to perform. And ultimately, you can have your own assumptions in your own forecast, which is usually more conservative if you're on the buy side. So that is kind of the cornerstone of any financial model that you're going to work in. And as a result, the choose function is going to be used extensively, no matter which kind of model you might be working on. So now we are going to get into the example below, where we have revenue for 2021 for this company, and we have the upside case, the base case, and the downside case. And as I had discussed, these cases can represent the assumptions of different parties. Usually the upside case is what management has provided us with. The base case is probably the assumptions prepared by the sponsor or the acquiring party. And effectively, you'll notice that the base case is usually lower than the upside case because it assumes more conservative assumptions. And then you have the downside case, which is a further downward adjustment to the base case. So based on this data here, we want to calculate the revenue, and we want to instruct Excel to have a button here, which we can click on and cycle between these three cases so that our calculation of revenue ultimately reflects the different growth rates that we have here. So first, what we want to do is take our initial revenue and we want to multiply it by our growth rate, whatever that may be for the year. So 1 plus the growth rate in here. Obviously there's nothing there right now, so it's simply going to be the same 100,000 across the board, because right now Excel is assuming that the growth rate is 0 because we haven't inputted anything there. And now the next part is using the choose function to instruct Excel to select the information in these rows here based on the button that we're going to create shortly after this. So we have choose, so equals choose. The first part of choose is index number, which means what is the first data value within the data set that you have available here. So if I have, for example, 1 here, I'm simply going to type 1, and if I have choose once again, index number simply means if you want Excel to select the first value, what value is that? I'm just going to drag this down here. Right, so I have 1 selected here. So what is the first value that I want Excel to select if 1 is the position of the first value? And that is upside case here, let's call it. Let's assume that upside case is number 1. And then after that, once Excel recognizes that, okay, this is value number 1, then automatically, as soon as I start putting in more values, this automatically becomes value number 2, this becomes value number 3, and if I had more values here, they would be 4, 5, 6, and so on. In this case, I only have 3 values, so I go up from 1 to 3, and that is all that I have to input into this choose function. Now that I have these values set up, I can simply close my parentheses, hit Control and Enter, and copy this formula over. Now, immediately you'll notice this value error here, and that is simply happening because as we move across with our calculation, we haven't anchored it over here. So we have to simply go in here, hover over B16, hit F4 so that it anchors it, hit Control and Enter, and then copy across. So now you'll notice that Excel automatically will pick up the numbers associated with upside case, because we've indicated to Excel that upside case is number 1 in this data set here. So if upside case is number 1, then base case would be number 2, and downside case would be number 3. And we can test this by simply changing the number here to 2. So automatically you'll notice that Excel picks up the values here. And if I were to change this to 3, Excel will pick up the values in the downside case, as you'll notice here. And ultimately the impact of this is right over here. So revenue in upside case is expected to grow from 100,000 to 316,000 roughly. If it's base case, then it's only 229,000, and if it's the downside case, then it's only 183,000. So we have got the choose function running here, but how do we make this more easier to use for a user who just wants to play around with the data here, and they don't want to be concerned with the 1, 2, 3 that we kind of have set up here? Because sure, we've built this and we know that upside case is 1 and base is 2 and so on, but another user comes in, they're probably not going to know what the numbers are related to, or what each number is associated to. So it's really important to be able to build a button in here which kind of correlates to the number that you're going to have in this cell. Let's see how that could work. So we're going to go back to 1 again, and we're going to go up here to the developer tab. Now mind you, by default Excel does not have the developer tab. So if you don't have this showing up here, there's no need to worry. You can simply right click on your ribbon up here anywhere. So it can be supposedly right below over here. And you're going to get an option called customize the ribbon. Select that. And once you do that, you're going to have this dialog box pop up for you. And what you want to do is navigate here into this list over here. You're going to see a series of options, and you want to simply check the developer box there. So if developer was not showing up here for you, it was probably because this was unchecked. So you want to check it, and you want to hit OK. And once you do that, the developer box is going to show up for you here. Once the developer box is there, you want to go in there, and you want to select the insert option here, and you want to pick the second option here which says combo box form control. Click on that. You're going to get a plus sign like this, so your cursor is going to have a plus sign, and you want to start dragging. You want to basically size your button. Once you have that, you will notice that you now have kind of a button that doesn't have anything inside of it, but you can click on it and it will give you a drop down. Now the last step here is to link this to the number that I have here. So in order to do that, I'll right click on it, I'll go down to format control, and I'll have kind of a range of options here. The first one is input range. So effectively, what input range do I want this drop down to have? So when I select it, what options do I want to show up here? And obviously that's going to be upside, base, and downside case. So I'll select this once again, format control. The input range is going to be my cells here. And then the cell link. Which cell do I want Excel to change automatically as I cycle through these different cases? And that is the cell over here, which is linked to the choose function. So I'll select that. And then I'll hit OK after that. And you'll notice Excel provide these value errors across the board. That is because once we hit OK on the format control option that we had with the button there, Excel will run the number to 0 because it kind of resets the cell, and the reset number kind of is 0. So just to kind of fix these numbers or the errors that we have here, all you have to do is select the drop down and select one of the cases that you have here. I'm going to select the upside case. Once I do that, I have all the numbers showing up for me again. And then in order to move this button over here so that it covers the 1 here, I can right click on it, hit escape, and then move it over here, just like that. And then I'll hit escape again, and I'm out of the button. Now, for a user, as you can imagine, it's really easy, so they can come into the model or whatever, kind of the revenue schedule in this case that we have. They can select the drop down, hit base case, and the numbers automatically update. They can select downside case, and the numbers will automatically update once again. So this is incredibly useful. This is a great tool, and any good or well-built, well-thought-out financial model is going to have nuances like this, where you have a drop-down button and you can play around with the various cases in the model. Typically, it's 3 cases in any model, but you can have different models that go up to 5 or 6 or even 7 cases. That is excessive most of the time. Usually we're restricted to 3 cases, where the user kind of toggles between the 3 and analyzes the impact on the final result.